In a compelling discussion, filmmaker Oliver Stone and historian Peter Kuznick delve into the intricate web of geopolitics, war profiteering, and the looming threat of nuclear conflict, particularly in the context of NATO's relationship with Russia and the potential for war with Iran. Their conversation spans historical events, contemporary political dynamics, and the implications of military actions on global stability. The podcast opens with Stone expressing his fears about the current geopolitical climate, particularly the risk of nuclear war. He draws parallels between the present situation and the prelude to World War I, highlighting the complex alliances and animosities that have resurfaced, particularly between the United States and Russia. Stone emphasizes the irrationality of the U.S. stance towards Russia, especially given the historical context of the last 2 decades, where relations had been relatively stable before the resurgence of Cold War rhetoric. Kuznick adds depth to this discussion by referencing the historical roots of U.S. Russia tensions, tracing them back to the early 20th century and the aftermath of the Soviet Revolution. He notes that the U.S. has consistently viewed Russia through a lens of suspicion and hostility, a sentiment that has been perpetuated by neoconservative ideologies in Washington. Both men agree that the current administration's aggressive posture towards Russia, including the labeling of President Putin as a thug and murderer, has only exacerbated tensions. The conversation shifts to NATO's expansion and its implications for global security. Stone and Kuznick discuss how NATO's eastward movement, particularly the inclusion of Ukraine and Georgia, has been perceived as a direct threat by Russia. They argue that the U.S. and NATO have failed to recognize the historical significance of Ukraine to Russia, which has led to a dangerous escalation of conflict. The discussion highlights the irony of NATO, originally formed as a defensive alliance, now being viewed as an aggressor by Russia. Kuznick points out that the U.S. has a long history of intervening in foreign conflicts under the guise of promoting democracy, yet these actions often lead to unintended consequences. The situation in Ukraine, where the U.S. has supported a government that has taken a hardline stance against Russia, is presented as a case study of this flawed approach. Both men express concern that the ongoing conflict could spiral into a larger war, potentially involving nuclear weapons. A significant portion of the discussion focuses on the concept of war profiteering and the military-industrial complex. Stone and Kuznick argue that the financial incentives tied to war have corrupted U.S. foreign policy, leading to decisions that prioritize profit over peace. They reference historical instances, such as the hearings led by Gerald Nye in the 1930s, which sought to expose the profiteering motives behind World War I. The failure to address these issues has allowed the military-industrial complex to thrive, perpetuating a cycle of conflict and economic gain. Kuznick emphasizes that the current defense budget, which exceeds $1 trillion, is a reflection of this ongoing problem. The conversation touches on the role of major defense contractors in shaping U.S. foreign policy, suggesting that their interests often take precedence over the well-being of American citizens and global stability. Stone and Kuznick argue that this dynamic must be challenged if there is to be any hope for a more peaceful future. The podcast also delves into the state of the global nuclear arsenal, with Kuznick explaining how the U.S. and other nuclear powers are modernizing their weapons systems. He highlights the dangers of this arms race, particularly in light of the potential for miscalculation or accidental launches. The discussion underscores the need for greater transparency and accountability regarding nuclear weapons, as well as the importance of international treaties aimed at reducing arsenals. Stone and Kuznick express concern that the current trajectory of U.S. foreign policy, particularly under the Biden administration, is leading to a more aggressive stance towards both Russia and China. They argue that this approach is not only reckless but also counterproductive, as it alienates potential allies and increases the likelihood of conflict. As the conversation progresses, the focus shifts to the potential for war with Iran. Stone and Kuznick discuss how the U.S. has historically viewed Iran as a threat, particularly following the 1979 revolution. They argue that the narrative surrounding Iran has been shaped by fear and misunderstanding, leading to a series of confrontations that could escalate into open conflict. Kuznick emphasizes that diplomatic engagement is crucial in addressing the challenges posed by Iran. He suggests that the U.S. should seek to establish a more constructive relationship with Iran, rather than perpetuating a cycle of hostility. Stone echoes this sentiment, arguing that the U.S. must move away from its imperialistic tendencies and embrace a more collaborative approach to international relations.